Last film of the night at the Toronto International Film Festival. Are you ready for this? My name's Tom Powers. I'm the documentary programmer of the festival. Let me say some important thank yous to our lead and major sponsors, Bell, RBC, Bulgari, and Visa for their continued support. I want to thank our major supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, Telefilm Canada, and the City of Toronto for their continued support. This film is eligible for the People's Choice Award and the People's Choice Documentary Award. You can vote for your favorite films at tiff.net/vote. I want to thank Elevation Pictures, Neon, and Universal Pictures for providing us with this film. We last had Brett Morgen at the festival for his extraordinary film about Jane Goodall, Jane, one of the highlights of my programming career here. Tonight, totally different film, totally different subject matter, and one of the things about Brett Morgen's career, as he's profiled so many fascinating characters, Kurt Cobain, Robert Evans, each film is different. Each film he is bringing something unique to the subject, and he's certainly done that tonight with Moonage Daydream. We are so pleased to welcome him. The first time he's shown this film to an audience on an IMAX screen, the way it was meant to be seen. Please welcome Brett Morgen.
Thank you, Tom. Your introduction made me feel very big, and now I feel very small. This is totally trippy. I cut this on my laptop, and it's really, you got to understand how strange this is. This was, movies are, as we know, are collaborations. This film took 7 years. We were scheduled to take 18 months. And so at a certain point, it was like I found myself pretty much alone with my laptop. We couldn't afford at that point to hire anyone to cut, so I had to cut it myself. So I'll apologize in advance. You're going to see a lot of mistakes, and that was by design. One of the great things I learned from studying David was that there are no mistakes. There's only happy accidents. So consider what you're going to see one big happy accident. Thank you. As Tom said, all of my films, I try to make them kind of different from the next. And that's kind of how I designed my career. And I got to a certain point in my career where I realized they were all kind of the same thing, very kind of narratively oriented. And as I approached Bowie, I actually had this idea before I even knew it was Bowie to do something called the IMAX music experience, which I made up in my head. And the idea was that this is sacred real estate, this room. I don't need to hear Wikipedia in here. Like, I'm not interested to come to a movie theater to hear facts or to learn. I want an experience. So I came up with this idea that what if we can create a space for audiences to have an intimate and sublime experience with a subject, someone that they love and they know, and just be swimming in this magnificent spectacle. And then I landed on doing David Bowie. And what I thought was going to be just a very straight, not very straight, a very not straight 40-minute IMAX experience really consumed my life. I was a fan, but I had never really heard his interviews. And the experience of the last 5 years has not just changed me as a husband and a father and a person and a man, but has completely changed everything I want to do with the rest of my career. David Bowie lived, I think, perhaps the most extraordinary life, and it was by design. And one thing I've been having to talk about David a lot, and I get kind of uncomfortable because I only met him once. So I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I've observed him very intimately for the last few years. And the thing I think that I take away most is his courage. I mean, he was like had the courage and of like Magellan, of a great explorer, of Neil Armstrong. for someone to be willing to risk everything to satisfy a creative itch is something I have not seen from any other mass entertainer, and I don't know if we ever will. David Bowie was not just an amazing artist, he was a brilliant philosopher, and through him, I feel like I have learned a roadmap on how to lead a more fulfilling and satisfying life. So tonight, as a result of that, you are witnessing my last music documentary, for real, and perhaps the last archival film I'll make, because I've been doing them long enough, and what I learned from David, I only have however many years left, and it's time for some other adventures. This film was like sort of a high wire act. I really had to sort of feel my way through it, and I took all of my sort of guidance through David's methodologies and techniques to try to create a film that's not about David Bowie, but that kind of is Bowie, the experience. So I'm going to ask you to kind of surrender, if you can, to this ginormous screen and Paul Massey's mind-blowing 12.0 mix. I walked in this morning to do a QC, and I saw David, David, are you in the room? Yeah, the man designed the space. We had I saw David, and I was like, oh, I don't need to QC here. We're out of it. We're in great hands. This is the flagship IMAX that we're in tonight, as you guys know. This is the place to see this film. I am so excited to deliver it to you. Well, I hope I deliver it to you tonight. I know I'm being long and we're going to be up late. So just a few quick thank yous. I have to thank Neon, Tom Quinn, and his team for taking on this film and bringing us here and taking it out all over the country this week. Neon's not a distribution company. They are like an identity. They're just an incredible creative power, and it's an honor to work with them. Universal Pictures is launching this film this week in 40 countries around the world, including Turkey, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Israel, Ukraine. We're opening Ukraine on Friday, which is like, but Russia does not get the film. So I'm just like, this is the weird, you guys are going to see, this is like a really kind of weird art project. And the fact that Universal has put themselves behind this is just unbelievable. And I'm a film geek. I love cinema. I don't like watching movies at home. And when I decided to be a documentary filmmaker in 1989, I had one goal, which was to create theatrical nonfiction motion pictures. I had no interest in doing anything for television. And this wasn't a thing back in the 80s. It was just like, I love cinema, so I want to tell stories. And if you're a filmmaker, there is no better place you can possibly be than in the IMAX world. Megan is here, the president of IMAX. I would like everyone to please join me in giving her an enormous round of applause for what she has brought to all of us. I kind of, they didn't ask me to do this. I kind of sort of just said, I'm doing this IMAX thing. And then it sort of made it sort of happen. And Megan saw the film with John Turner, who I owe you so much, sir. Local Canadian. And their conviction and faith in this really kind of strange movie is just like, it's humbling to say the least. So let me shut up, let David take over. It's going to end very late. I'm going to tell you that movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's really 2 hours and 20, but if I tell you it's 2 hours and 40, it won't seem as long. So just think you're in for a long ride, and it's going to be really interesting. I'm so excited to see it with you guys. We'll talk afterwards. One last very personal request. Very personal. Never trust the director when he says one more thing. If you feel the urge, if the Spirit comes into you, because we're in church tonight, so if you feel the urge, let your head move. let your feet move, and if anyone is compelled, just get up and start dancing, because we're about to listen to David Bowie in 12.0 IMAX. Enjoy the movie. Thank you very much.
Brett, this film begins like plunging us into the bizarreness of what David Bowie must have felt like to people in the 1970s, and gradually, as the film goes on, he becomes more accessible, I think, in the way he did in his career. Can you talk about your intentionality in doing that?
It wasn't. Your response in that moment was not part of the design, but I think it's the film, when modern love kicks in, it's sort of, the footage is a little more sort of mainstream. The intent that I had, though, was to, I don't know, Tom. I don't have a good answer on that one. I'm so sorry.
Let's go. We'll redirect.
Okay.
The amount of footage you had to go through, I think the precise amount is a shitload.
Yeah, shitload, yeah.
How did you manage that?
Well, it took 2 years to screen through all the footage, and that was probably the 2 best years of my career, because for those 2 years I didn't have to do anything but go to work every day and watch David Bowie footage.
Sounds like a good life.
It was a great life until I had to start writing after the 2 years. And I couldn't even remember what I'd seen 2 years earlier. That was like crazy. And the hardest part of this film for me personally was writing the script, because I screened all this stuff, and in the past, like Jane, after screening everything, I was able to put the script out in about 3 days. Kurt was even less. Because after I've screened everything, I'm just like, I hold back until it's done, and then I'm just ready to explode. With this, I had put in the schedule a week to write the script and then start editing. And I don't want to say I had writer's block. For 8 months, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to write an experience, because all my films are so linear, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And this, I wanted the audience to not be aware of the narrative until the movie's sort of moving forward. So I was saying to you outside, in the first 20 minutes during the Ziggy section, I desperately wanted to have at least some part of the film that was just bathed in mystery, the way that David discusses when he comes back and says about the power of Fats Domino. So that was definitely part of the rhythms. And what happened with the script was, for 8 months, I would go to work and I'd write essays. I'd write about chaos theory and the 20th century and transmission and all these themes that I wanted the film to explore, but I didn't know how to tie them together. I had established the through line. David presented it to me, which was transience, which he just repeated consistently from the beginning of his career all the way to the end. And after about 8 months, though, I drove to work one day, and I pulled up to my office, and I couldn't go inside. I just, like, it was like one last shot of tequila. Like, it was like that place was like a coffin for me. So I drove to LAX. I went to Albuquerque. I boarded an Amtrak, with the idea, partially because a couple reasons. Through David, I understood the importance of changing your environment and the value of being in transit. And miraculously, the second the train left the station, the script just poured out. And about 3 hours later, I had the first draft. It was ultimately broken. I sort of alluded to this earlier on, but I had, on the train, I brought Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, and I had all the Bowie music on my phone. And I tried to take all these themes and connect it to kind of a hero's journey, where David was creating his own challenges and storms for himself. And then that lent itself so that Berlin became a movement. Mainstream success became a movement. Most people think of David as David through characters. I kind of rejected that idea. And I found location to be far more important in sort of structuring the film. And so then what I did was I took, this was like really silly. I said, okay, let's take 3 songs from each album that are related to the central theme, put it into a playlist, mash it up, and see where we get. And then I did playback on the train, and by the time I got back to LA, I was ready to start cutting.
At your structure. It feels like you're very intentionally showing us footage that most of us have never seen before. Most of the world has never seen before. The thing, if someone here was looking for the Let's Dance music video, you're assuming that the audience has seen that. You're going to use your time to show them something that we haven't seen. Can you talk about that reveal?
I think that one of the challenges with doing this kind of work is that you don't want to put something in simply because it hasn't been seen. You have to be lock into your structure and your script, and you can't. So I know it probably feels to a lot of people that there's a lot of sort of zigzags and maybe it's spontaneous, but in my mind, it's all very fluid. And but I did understand that there were 3 audiences I was trying to reach. One of them was the hardcore, like who know everything, who've seen everything, and I wanted to be able to liberate some material from the vault. But then, I had to make a decision about stuff that had been more out in the world, and do I not use it simply because it's out in the world? And it just felt like, no, I have to make the best Bowie film I can. And so what this is really a kind of sort of balance, sort of my observations going through the material, and with a little lean towards releasing new material where it served the purpose of the film. And some of it, like the rock and roll scene where he's talking about his parents, that was shot 3/4-inch video. I mean, some of this stuff's VHS 5th generation, which again, I was like, what's that going to be like in IMAX? And when we got to the color correct, I just started pumping color into those scenes and just like painting. We did 650 hours of color correct, and all supervised. And probably every shot in this film has about 12 or 14 power windows. Because it's an IMAX, we had to really get in there and just grab every grain. Like we would fight. It was like, there was a part of it that was creative and artistic when we were coloring, and then the noise reduction just became this obsession to try to get it into a presentable state. And I remember telling the colors, I said, the worst part of this process is we're spending 70% of our time on actually the worst looking shots in the finished film just to get them to be par, so they wouldn't take you out of the film. And then I think I mentioned we did about a year of sound design and sound mix, which was really adventurous, because Paul Massey, who's from Toronto, all sound orientation in cinema is for the front of the room. And that's what you do. You support it on the sides. And I was really interested in keeping all the speakers kind of lit up, and to really surround the viewer and immerse them in David's art. So that was a whole learning curve. I think every person who worked on the film, which after we locked picture, I had Stefan Nadelman did the motion graphics, and the sound team, we all had to really change the way that we're used to approaching our work. And it was a struggle, it was traumatic, but we all felt that it was kind of in the spirit of Bowie, that we were taking our cues from him and just really reaching for it.
As I wrap this up, because I know it's late at night, I want to ask about the interviews. One thing that was so striking to me in watching this is Bowie has such a reputation as a trickster, as a person who's changing his personalities over his career. And I was really struck at how kind of forthright he is in these interviews. He's not, he's answering questions that are asked of him. Can you talk about what you found in those interviews?
Yeah, well, first of all, I had no idea the infinite wisdom that he has in his just every interview I pretty much heard. It seemed particularly in the 70s that there was a lot of attempts at gotcha journalism, and David just, he was for someone who has a reputation for deflecting, as we saw in this film, when do you see a rock star say, I can't let love into my life? I can't. I mean, it's so honest and it's so genuine. And so I found him to be, I loved listening to his interviews. I mean, they were always fascinating. I mean, everything, as I said, I drank the Kool-Aid. I just fell in love with this man. Everything he said seemed to be spot on. So that was really, I think, one of the great surprises for me making the film was that it was going to have this kind of life-affirming messaging, which making it during the pandemic felt very kind of poignant.
For my last question, you've been working on this for 7 years. You know, what is this audience had the first taste of it? It's going to be released to the rest of the world, many parts of the world, later this week. What does this moment feel like as you let this transition from being a private project to sharing it with the world?
I had a really heady experience at Cannes walking to the premiere. I didn't want to share it. Because as you know, once you put it out into the world, it's no longer yours. And we didn't even have links for the film. So I had the whole thing under wraps. And I knew that once it saw the light, it wasn't mine. And it was sort of my baby for 7 years. But I had an incredible experience the first time sitting with an audience with this film, where I felt the whole room fade out. And I forgot that I had edited it. And I felt that David was talking to me and only me throughout the whole film, even though I was in a room with 2,300 people. Yeah, it's kind of an amazing feeling. Right now, to your point, Tom, we love documentaries. You and I are like, this is our lives. So to be able to release a nonfiction film that's kind of this outside the box across the globe really feels like the culmination of a sort of 25-year journey to create theatrical nonfiction motion pictures.
Well, I will say you've had the chance to see it for the first time. I've now had a chance to see it a few times, and I can say the film keeps on repaying more viewings. And for those of you who take that journey over and over again, I think you're going to find that you'll see more and more stuff of it in it every time you watch. I know it's late. I thank you so much for staying late tonight on day 5 of the festival. There is 6 more days of the festival. I hope you get to see more films. You're the true soldiers of cinema on a Monday night being here. So thank you to you.
Can we just do a special thanks to the people in the front who were just blasted out? Thank you guys so much. I'm very sorry if your ears are ringing, but God bless you. And thank all of you for staying and have a wonderful night. And thank you, Tom, and Toronto.
Thanks, Brett Morgen.